Rain drizzled softly over the quiet Los Angeles night, the streetlights smearing amber streaks across the wet asphalt. Keanu Reeves pulled his hood a little tighter over his head as he wandered, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, lost in thought. He had finished a long day of filming, a day full of people and noise and cameras, but in these hours he always felt something gnawing at the edges of his heart. Fame never filled it. Money never patched it. The streets at night felt more honest than anything else in his life. He walked aimlessly, pausing now and then to watch puddles ripple or to look through the glowing windows of little shops that stayed open long past their usual hours. It was on one of those aimless turns, down a narrow lane lined with half-shuttered stores, that he noticed the light. It was not a bright light, just a muted golden glow spilling from the crack of a crooked door. Above the entrance hung a faded sign, G. Halbert's Antiquities. Keanu frowned, tilting his head. He had walked this neighborhood before and never seen this place. The display window was clouded with dust, but he could make out shapes inside. Shadowy stacks of old furniture, gilt picture frames, chipped statues, things forgotten. He pushed the door gently, and it creaked open with a low groan, a bell tinkling faintly overhead. The scent of old wood, wax, and something floral but aged greeted him. Felt like stepping into another time. His boots echoed on the warped floorboards as he moved deeper into the shop, his fingers brushing over objects whose stories he could only imagine. And then, half hidden behind a row of rusted coat racks, he saw it. The mirror was taller than him, framed in dark mahogany carved with curling vines and small birds frozen mid-flight. The glass itself was not perfectly smooth. It shimmered faintly, as though a layer of mist lived inside it. He stepped closer, drawn to it, his own reflection slowly forming, but it was not himself he saw. His breath caught in his chest. A small boy stared back at him, barefoot in a sunlit field. The boy was maybe 6, hair dark and messy, eyes wide with a soft light, holding a battered toy airplane in his hands. He spun it through the air, laughing, not at the man watching him but at the sky itself. Keanu felt something twist inside him so sharply he had to grab the frame to steady himself. This was him. This was him decades ago, before his mother got sick, before his father left, before he knew anything about loss. He could feel the warmth of that long-gone afternoon, could almost hear the sound of cicadas and distant wind chimes. His throat tightened, eyes stinging, as a memory long buried rose like smoke. Keanu glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see someone, anyone, watching him. The shop was empty. The street outside was empty. The boy in the mirror turned his head, locking eyes with the man he would become. A tear rolled down Keanu's cheek before he realized it, splashing onto his jacket. The mirror trembled faintly, as though the memory within it was alive. He whispered hoarsely, voice shaking, Where did you come from?" But there was no answer, only the boy's smile widening, full of that simple joy that adulthood steals from most people. Keanu took a step back, pressing a hand to his chest. He felt raw and exposed, like some invisible wound had been reopened. He thought of all the years spent chasing something he could not name, all the nights alone in hotel rooms, all the acts of kindness that felt more like penance than purpose. And here, in this strange and dusty shop, a mirror had shown him the one thing he had forgotten, that once, a long time ago, he had dreamed of flying. He stayed there for a long time, listening to the rain patter against the windows, staring at that laughing boy in the glass. His mind reeled with questions. Was it a trick, a hallucination, some old prop left behind by a magician? But deep down, beneath the doubts, he felt something awaken. He ran his hand along the carved wood, and the vines seemed to ripple like living things. Carefully, he tipped the mirror forward to lift it, but it was impossibly light, as if eager to follow him. He did not even think about payment, did not call out for the shopkeeper who never appeared. He simply carried it out into the rainy night, the bell over the door chiming softly as he left. On the street, beneath the streetlight's golden glow, The mirror reflected nothing but the boy, still smiling, still holding the plane. Keanu whispered, almost afraid to breathe too loud. "What are you?" And for the first time in years, he felt the stirrings of wonder. The mirror rode silently in the back seat of Keanu's car, wrapped in an old blanket. Yet even under layers of fabric he felt its presence. Every red light on his way home seemed to stretch. Every shadow in the passing streets seemed to lean toward it, as if drawn to whatever secret it carried. He parked near his apartment but could not bring himself to go upstairs. Instead, he sat behind the wheel, rain sliding down the windshield, and stared at the mirror through the rearview. The memory of that laughing boy still clung to him like a phantom heartbeat. He felt something unfamiliar, an urge not to keep this wonder hidden, but to share it, to see what it might reveal in others. The thought terrified him, and yet it pulled at him harder than anything he had felt in years. After a long breath, he turned the ignition again and began to drive without direction. Los Angeles at midnight was a strange place, alive with restless souls who had nowhere else to go. Keanu's car rolled through narrow streets until a lonely gas station sign flickered ahead, its buzzing light casting a pale glow on an empty curb. That was when he noticed a taxi parked near the pumps, engine off, wipers lazily scraping at the drizzle. A man sat inside, slumped forward against the wheel, his shoulders heavy as if he carried a lifetime there. Keanu pulled over slowly, hands tight on the steering wheel. He watched the man lift his head and rub his face with calloused hands, exhaustion etched in every line. Something in that motion, an old unspoken sorrow, echoed in Keanu's chest. He glanced at the mirror in the back seat and felt that pull again. He stepped out into the damp night, the cold air biting at his skin, and walked toward the taxi. The driver's window rolled down partway as Keanu approached, the man's eyes narrowing at first, then widening with stunned recognition. Keanu Reeves. His voice was rough, carrying disbelief and a faint rasp, as though life had weathered it down. Keanu gave a small nod, unsure how to begin. I have something I want to show you," he said softly. The driver let out a dry laugh. "Man, it's 3 in the morning. You in a movie or something?" But Keanu didn't smile. He simply walked back to his car, lifted the mirror carefully, and carried it toward the taxi, rain dripping from the frame. The driver watched, frowning, curiosity fighting fatigue in his eyes. Keanu set the mirror against the side of the taxi and stepped back, his heart hammering. "Just look," he whispered. For a moment, nothing happened. The driver's own tired reflection stared back at him, shadows under his eyes, graying hair, a jacket worn thin from years behind the wheel. He was about to scoff, to tell Keanu he needed sleep, when the reflection rippled, softly like water stirred by a gentle wind. His eyes widened. The glass brightened, revealing not a middle-aged man but a boy of perhaps 12, sitting cross-legged on a porch in the glow of a summer evening. The boy held a half-finished wooden ship in his hands, sanding its edges with care, humming a tune that had long been buried in the folds of memory. The scent of fresh-cut pine and sea salt filled the air, though neither existed in that gas station lot. The driver's lips trembled. His hands rose instinctively, pressing against the glass, and a broken laugh escaped him, a sound caught between joy and heartbreak. That's me," he choked out, tears spilling freely. "I wanted to build boats, not drive strangers around for a living." Keanu felt his own throat tighten as he stepped closer, placing a hand on the man's shoulder. He did not speak, did not try to offer wisdom or comfort, because there was no need. The mirror had spoken in a language older than words, a language of pure memory. The driver closed his eyes, letting the tears fall, his chest rising and falling with shaky breaths. When he opened them again, the reflection had returned to normal, leaving only his own weathered face staring back. But something had shifted, an ember glowing faintly in the ashes. He looked up at Keanu with a smile that was part gratitude, part disbelief. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what that thing is, but thank you." Keanu squeezed his shoulder gently. "Maybe," He said quietly, "It's time to build again." And then he turned, lifting the mirror once more, carrying it back to his car under the soft hiss of the rain. Feeling the weight of the world grow strangely lighter, the mirror stayed with Keanu like a living heartbeat. Days passed, yet he found himself drifting through the city with no plan other than to listen to that strange inner pull that told him where to go next. He had no idea if the mirror would always work, or if that first night had been some fleeting magic, but he could not ignore the way the taxi driver's eyes had changed after seeing it. That look, raw and childlike, had stayed with Keanu more than any applause or red carpet flashbulb ever had. It was late evening when the feeling stirred again, as though something in his chest tugged him down a different street than usual, guiding him toward a neon sign buzzing against a cracked brick wall. Elva's 24-hour diner. He knew the place, a cheap, tired eatery on a corner known mostly to night workers and lost souls. He parked and stepped into the warm, greasy air inside, the mirror carefully covered in his trunk. The diner was almost empty, except for a single waitress behind the counter. She moved with a kind of weariness that felt older than her years, carrying a coffee pot like it was made of lead. Keanu took a booth quietly, watching her from the corner of his eye as she poured refills for a man in a faded construction jacket. She smiled when she spoke, but it was a smile that never reached her eyes. The kind of smile that people wear to keep from breaking. When she came to his booth, her pen hovered over her notepad without looking up. "Coffee." Her voice was soft but flat, the kind of tone born from endless nights of scraping by. Keanu nodded. "Please." She poured his cup, and as she turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of her shoes. Ballet flats, scuffed and worn thin, the kind that had once danced across polished floors instead of sticky diner tiles. "Do you dance?" The question left his mouth before he could stop it. She froze halfway through a step and finally looked at him. Her eyes were pale green, tired but sharp. "Not anymore," she said after a long pause. "Why?" Keanu just studied her quietly, sensing something fragile beneath that simple answer. He paid for his coffee, left a tip far too large, and slipped outside without another word. But he did not leave. He waited in his car until her shift ended, until she emerged into the night, hugging her jacket tight against the cold. She looked around, startled to see him standing by his car, holding something tall and covered in a blanket. "What is that?" she asked, suspicion flickering in her eyes. Keanu only said, "Please, just look." He set the mirror upright under a flickering street lamp. She hesitated, folding her arms, but curiosity nudged her closer. At first, she only saw herself. Messy hair, diner apron still tied tight, dark circles under her eyes. Her lips curled in a bitter smile. "Yeah, that's about right." But then the glass shimmered, softly, like moonlight rippling across water. Her breath caught as the image changed. There she was, not as she was now, but as a little girl in a pale pink leotard, twirling clumsily but joyfully in a sunlit studio. The air in the mirror smelled faintly of rosin and chalk, and distant piano notes floated through like a half-remembered song. The girl's eyes shone with unshakable hope, her feet bleeding but still dancing, dreaming of grand stages and golden curtains. The woman watching raised trembling hands to her mouth, a sob breaking free before she could stop it. "Oh, God, I wanted to." Her voice cracked and tears spilled freely, staining her cheeks. Keanu did not move. He did not offer platitudes or hollow encouragement. He simply stood beside her, silent and steady, as the memory played out in the glass. The reflection lingered for what felt like forever, then slowly dissolved back into her tired face, eyes still wet, but now carrying a spark of something that had been lost. She turned to him, shoulders shaking. "I do not even know why I stopped," she whispered. "Money, my parents. Everything just fell apart and I thought it was over." Keanu met her gaze, his own eyes soft, and said, "Dreams do not die. They just wait for us to come back." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded card with the name of a small community dance studio written on it, a place he quietly supported. "They have classes. If you ever want to try again. She took it with trembling fingers, clutching it as if it might vanish. For the first time that night, her smile reached her eyes. Keanu wrapped the mirror once more, feeling its frame hum softly beneath his fingertips as he placed it back in his car. He looked back to see the waitress standing under the street lamp, staring at the card and then at her own scuffed shoes. She lifted one foot, twisting it slightly as though remembering how to turn, and for a heartbeat, the weight on Keanu's chest felt lighter. He drove off into the night, the city blurring around him, knowing he would follow that pull wherever it led, because somewhere out there, someone else was waiting to remember. The city hummed with a low, restless energy as dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in pale streaks of lavender and gray. Keanu had barely slept. The mirror leaned against the wall of his apartment, uncovered now, its carved frame catching the first hints of morning light. He sat on the couch, staring at it, feeling the strange ache that had become familiar since he'd carried it from the antique shop. He replayed the waitress's face in his mind, the raw wonder, the tears, the fragile smile. The mirror was no ordinary object. It was something older, deeper, and it seemed to call him again and again. That pull in his chest had become almost physical now, like a quiet drumbeat guiding him somewhere unknown. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. Then he rose, grabbed his jacket, and wrapped the mirror once more. By mid-morning, Keanu found himself driving through streets he hadn't visited in years, past neighborhoods still waking up, until the looming glass facade of a children's hospital appeared ahead. He did not know why he had come here. He only knew that the mirror in his trunk felt heavier, as though it wanted to be here. Inside the hospital, the world felt both too bright and too quiet. Hallways lined with cheerful murals and faded posters were punctuated by the soft hiss of ventilators and the distant beeping of machines. He carried the mirror carefully, trying not to draw attention. A nurse at the desk looked up in surprise. "Can I help you?" she asked. Keanu hesitated, unsure how to explain. "I'm visiting someone," he murmured, though no one waited for him. She gave him a puzzled glance, but recognizing him, simply nodded. "Children's ward is down that hall." He walked slowly, the mirror wrapped in its blanket, his boots squeaking faintly on polished floors. As he turned a corner, he noticed a boy sitting alone in a wheelchair near a large window, the sun casting stripes of light across his thin frame. The boy's head was shaved, his hospital gown too big for him, and his small hands rested motionless on his lap. Yet his eyes, they were alive, watching the world outside as though memorizing it. Keanu stopped a few feet away, unsure how to begin. The boy looked over, startled, then blinked in disbelief. "You're Keanu Reeves," he whispered, voice raspy but bright with sudden awe. Keanu crouched to meet his gaze. "Hey there," he said gently. "What's your name?" "Mason," the boy replied, a shy smile tugging at his lips. Keanu glanced toward the nurse's station, then back at Mason. "Do you want to see something special?" Mason's eyes widened as Keanu unwrapped the mirror, leaning it carefully against the wall opposite the window. The boy tilted his head, puzzled. "It's just a mirror." Keanu shook his head slowly. "Not this one. Look closer." Mason wheeled himself forward, the chair's soft clicks echoing in the hallway, until he was close enough to see his reflection. For a long moment nothing changed. He saw only himself, a frail boy in a hospital gown, dark circles under his eyes. His smile faded, and his gaze dropped to his lap. "I don't like looking," he murmured. "I don't like seeing this." Keanu's heart clenched, but he said nothing, just watched. Then, as if stirred by Mason's quiet sorrow, the glass rippled. The boy gasped softly as the reflection transformed. The hospital gown dissolved, replaced by a paint-splattered t-shirt. Sunlight spilled across a wide meadow where wildflowers danced in the breeze. In his hands were brushes, vivid colors dripping from their tips. In the distance stood a half-finished canvas on an easel, bursting with streaks of blue and green, and the boy in the mirror laughed, Healthy, strong, alive. Mason's hands trembled as he reached toward the glass, his fingers brushing it lightly. "That's me," he whispered, voice breaking. "I remember. I wanted to paint the biggest picture in the world, before I got sick." Tears welled in his eyes, falling freely now, but his lips curved into a fragile, radiant smile. He looked at Keanu, overwhelmed. "I thought I forgot." Keanu knelt beside him, one hand resting lightly on the boy's shoulder. "Dreams don't go away, Mason," he said softly. "They wait for you until you're ready." Mason stared at the mirror, at that vibrant, joyful version of himself, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, a spark of hope ignited in his gaze. "Do you think I could still paint?" Keanu squeezed his shoulder gently. "I think you already have in here." He touched his own chest. "And I think the world is waiting to see it." Mason laughed through his tears, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "Then maybe I should ask for some paints," he whispered almost to himself. Keanu stood, his own chest aching with quiet gratitude. He would make sure Mason had everything he needed. As he rewrapped the mirror, he glanced one last time at the reflection. The boy in the meadow looked back at him and smiled, holding up his paintbrush as if to say, "Thank you." Night blanketed the city in a heavy hush, the kind of silence that hums with distant traffic and faraway sirens. But Keanu could not rest. The mirror leaned against the wall of his living room now, unwrapped, as if it belonged to the space, as if it had been there forever. He stood before it with a glass of water in his hand, staring into its depths as though it might speak to him again. He had carried it to strangers, seen forgotten dreams bloom in tired eyes, and each time the glow in their faces had stitched something back together inside him. Yet tonight, as he gazed into that shifting glass, a strange unease crept through him. The reflection did not ripple with light or memory. It only showed him, tall, still, a man alone in a dimly lit room. He set the glass down slowly, his breath shallow. Something felt wrong. He knelt, running his fingers along the carved wood, tracing the delicate vines and birds, and for a heartbeat, they felt warm under his touch, almost alive. But then a faint sound shivered through the air, a hairline crack, so soft he thought he imagined it. His eyes darted to the corner of the glass where a thin fracture began to crawl like a frozen lightning bolt. "No," he whispered, reaching out. The mirror quivered, the mist within it swirling violently, until suddenly another image appeared. Not of the boy in the field or any forgotten dream, but of Keanu himself, as a man standing in total darkness, empty-handed. He felt his knees weaken. Where the boy once held a toy airplane, there was nothing now, only outstretched fingers grasping at air. The image felt hollow, stripped of that joy he had seen before. Keanu swallowed hard, a cold dread coiling in his chest. Why nothing?" he murmured, voice breaking. He staggered back, almost tripping over the coffee table, his mind spinning. He thought of the waitress twirling under a street lamp, the taxi driver clutching invisible wood shavings, the sick boy whispering about paintbrushes. He had given them pieces of themselves back. But what of his own? He sat on the floor, back against the couch, the mirror looming over him like some silent judge. His memories began to flood unbidden. Auditions that never worked out, projects he abandoned, relationships faded into distance. He thought of his childhood again, the boy with the airplane, the boy who had dreamed of flying. That boy had been there in the mirror the first night, but now the image was empty. Keanu pressed his palms against his face, feeling hot tears prick at his eyes. "Have I lost it?" he whispered to no one. He forced himself to look again, wiping his eyes, staring into that fractured glass. The crack had spread, splitting the reflection in two jagged pieces, but behind the distortion, the dark version of himself seemed to move, lifting his head slowly as if aware of Keanu's gaze. The man in the mirror stepped closer, his expression unreadable, then finally spoke, not with sound, but with words that formed in Keanu's mind like echoes. "You give dreams away. But what about yours?" The question hit him like a blow. He shook his head, choking out, "I don't know. I don't know anymore." The image flickered, the crack widening, shards of light scattering across the room. The mirror pulsed, once, twice, as if struggling to hold itself together. Keanu scrambled forward, placing both hands against the glass, desperate. "Please don't break. I still need you. I'm not finished." For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a faint glow began to bloom within the fractured depths. Soft and trembling, shapes emerged, blurry at first, then clearer. A film set under bright lights, a small crew huddled together, and Keanu sitting cross-legged on the ground, laughing with a child actor between takes. It was not fame. It was not applause. It was something simpler, purer. Connection, warmth, shared purpose. Tears spilled down Keanu's cheeks as he whispered, "That's it, that's still there." The crack in the glass glimmered like silver lightning, but it did not grow. Instead, it settled, solidifying as though the mirror had accepted something long denied. Keanu slumped back onto his heels, breath shaking, and for the first time in weeks, a fragile smile crossed his face. His own forgotten dream was not gone. It was still waiting, buried beneath years of noise. And now, with the mirror's help, he had seen it again. The moon hung low over Los Angeles, draping the city in silver. Keanu stood by his car, the mirror wrapped but still pulsing softly in the dark, as if it had become a living thing. The crack in the glass was still there, a faint vein of silver threading through its surface, but the mirror felt stable now, quiet and heavy with secrets. He ran his hand over the blanket's edge, lost in thought. The question still echoed in his mind. What about your own dreams? For years, he had poured himself into the lives of strangers, offered kindness in quiet ways, but he rarely turned that light inward. The mirror had reminded him that he, too, carried a boy inside who still longed to fly. He felt the pull again, subtle, insistent, guiding him not to a single person this time, but to a place where many gathered in search of something more. He followed that invisible thread through winding streets until a wide park opened before him, lit by scattered lanterns and the distant glow of food trucks. A small midnight market was in full bloom, alive with music and laughter. Keanu parked, stepping out into the soft murmur of voices. Booths lined the pathways, selling handmade crafts and old records, paper lanterns swaying in the cool breeze. He carried the mirror carefully, weaving between stalls, until he reached a grassy clearing where people sat on blankets listening to a lone guitarist play by the fountain. He set the mirror upright against a low stone wall, unwrapped it, and let the night air touch its surface. For a few moments no one noticed. Keanu stood nearby, hands in his pockets, watching the way the lantern light shimmered on the carved frame. Then a little girl wandered over, tugging at her mother's hand. "Mama, look," she whispered. The mother smiled faintly, distracted, but glanced into the glass and froze. Her own reflection softened, melted, until she saw herself as a teenager on a small stage, guitar in hand, eyes closed as she sang her heart out. The music from the live guitarist blended with the memory in the mirror, creating a strange harmony that made her chest ache. She pressed her hands to her mouth, tears filling her eyes. "I used to," she began but could not finish. Keanu offered no explanation, only a quiet nod. Others began to notice now. A man in a suit, clearly exhausted from work, stepped forward and peered into the glass. He gasped softly as he saw a boy crouched over a sketchpad, drawing superheroes with wide, determined strokes. A teenager with bright pink hair looked in next and covered her mouth, seeing herself twirling in a wedding dress she had once sewn from scraps of fabric as a child. One by one they came, strangers connected only by the sudden rush of remembering what they had lost. Keanu moved through the crowd like a shadow, steadying the mirror when someone leaned too close, offering tissues to those who wept, listening as people spoke aloud dreams they had buried for decades. A man whispered about the bakery he never opened. A woman laughed through tears about the garden she wanted to plant. A young couple stood side by side, each seeing their younger selves and clutching each other's hands as if afraid to let go. The guitarist stopped playing, drawn by the murmurs, and when he looked into the mirror, his fingers trembled on the strings. "I almost quit," he confessed softly. "But I think I'll keep playing." The crowd cheered quietly, like a prayer answered. Lanterns bobbed in the breeze, scattering warm light over tear-streaked faces, and for a moment, the entire park felt suspended in a dreamlike stillness. Keanu watched them all, his chest aching in the best way, feeling something deep inside him knit back together. When the night grew thin and the market began to wind down, people drifted away one by one, still wiping their eyes, still whispering about what they had seen. Keanu lifted the mirror once more, wrapping it carefully, feeling the crack beneath the blanket like a scar, a reminder that even broken things could hold great magic. He looked out over the emptying park, at the lanterns swaying above the fountain, and felt a profound peace settle over him. For years he had wondered if he was doing enough, if kindness in small doses ever truly mattered. But tonight, in the glow of forgotten dreams returning to strangers' eyes, he knew the answer. He placed the mirror gently in the back of his car, closed the trunk, and stood under the moonlight for a long, quiet moment, breathing in the night like it was his first taste of air. The mirror's weight had grown familiar on Keanu's shoulders, but tonight as he carried it through the quiet streets, it felt heavier than ever. The city was still, the hum of nightlife fading into a distant memory as he turned down an alley lined with shuttered workshops. A soft drizzle dampened the air, curling fog around the dim streetlights. He did not know exactly why he came here. He only followed that steady pull inside his chest, the same whisper that had led him to the waitress, the boy, the mother in the park. Ahead, an old mechanic's garage stood half-lit, its wide door rolled open just enough to reveal the glow of a single work lamp. A man stood inside, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hands dark with grease, working silently on an engine that might never run again. Keanu paused at the threshold, the mirror wrapped in his arms. The man glanced up, eyes narrowing, not in recognition but in suspicion. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, with silver hair and a build that spoke of decades of hard labor. His face was carved with lines of someone who had spent more time solving problems than dreaming. "We're closed," the man said gruffly, voice echoing in the cavernous garage. Keanu stepped inside anyway, his boots scuffing against the concrete floor. "I'm not here for repairs," he said softly. The man's gaze sharpened. "Then what do you want?" Keanu set the mirror down, still covered, and straightened slowly. "To show you something." The man's expression hardened. "Listen, I don't need whatever you're selling. I've had a long night." He turned back to his workbench, wiping his hands on a rag, clearly dismissing Keanu. But Keanu didn't leave. He slowly pulled the blanket from the mirror, revealing the carved frame, the faint crack spiderwebbing across one corner. The lamplight caught on the glass, making it glow faintly. The mechanic froze mid-wipe, curiosity flickering across his weathered face. "What is that?" he muttered. Keanu tilted the mirror toward him. "Just look." The man shook his head immediately, turning back to the engine. "I don't need to. I know what I'll see. I'm too old for dreams." His words were sharp, almost bitter, like he was fighting some unseen battle. Keanu stepped closer, voice low but steady. "This doesn't show who you are now. It shows what you've forgotten." The man's hands clenched around the rag. He didn't move, didn't turn, but Keanu saw his shoulders tense. "I don't want to remember," the man said hoarsely. "What good are old dreams when life's already taken them?" His voice broke slightly on the last word, and Keanu felt a deep ache in his chest. He crouched beside the mirror, running his hand along the carved edge. "Sometimes," he whispered, "remembering is what saves us." Silence stretched between them, thick with unsaid things. The mechanic finally exhaled a shaky breath and turned. He walked toward the mirror with slow, reluctant steps, like a man approaching an old grave. He stopped a foot away, staring at his own reflection. grease-stained, tired eyes dulled by years of routine. He scoffed softly. "See, just an old man, nothing more." But then the glass shimmered. The man stiffened as the reflection wavered, dissolving into a younger version of himself standing on a racetrack, helmet under his arm, laughing with grease on his cheek but joy in his eyes. Behind him, a sleek race car gleamed under the sun, painted with his own name in bold letters. The sound of cheering crowds and the roar of engines filled the air. The younger man in the mirror waved to someone off-screen, radiant with a hope that seemed endless. The mechanic staggered back, gripping the workbench for support, tears flooding his eyes. I wanted to drive," he whispered, voice trembling. "I wanted to race until I couldn't anymore. And then my brother died and I took over the shop. And I just forgot." His knees buckled and he sank onto a stool, covering his face with his hands. Keanu placed a hand gently on his shoulder, grounding him in the storm of memory. "You didn't lose it," Keanu said softly. "It's still there. You can still remember." The man shook his head, tears streaking through the grime on his cheeks. "I'm too old," he choked out. Keanu crouched to meet his eyes. Maybe not. But maybe you can still build that car. Maybe you can drive it once just for you. Dreams aren't just for children. They're fuel. They're why we keep going." The man looked at him, eyes wet and searching, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then slowly the mechanic smiled, a broken, weary smile, but real. "I still have that old chassis in the back," he whispered. "Maybe I'll finish it one day." Keanu squeezed his shoulder. "One day starts tonight." Keanu covered the mirror again, feeling the hum of its quiet magic, as he carried it back through the drizzle. He glanced once over his shoulder. The man stood in the garage doorway, watching him go, that small smile still on his face, eyes distant as if already seeing himself behind the wheel. Keanu disappeared into the night, heart heavy and light all at once, knowing that somewhere deep in the city, another forgotten dream had begun to breathe again. The days blurred together after that night at the mechanic's shop. Keanu kept the mirror close, but something inside him began to sense that its time with him was drawing toward an ending. The silver crack had deepened slightly, faint but visible now even in dim light, as though the mirror itself was growing tired. He found himself sitting alone in his apartment one evening, the rain tapping softly against the window, thinking about everyone he had met, the waitress who might be dancing again, the boy who would paint from his hospital bed, the old man whispering about finishing his car. Each memory felt like a thread, and together they wove something warm and whole in his heart. Yet that quiet question still lingered. "What about you?" Keanu decided to take the mirror one last time. The pull in his chest led him beyond the familiar streets, past the glowing towers of downtown, into an older part of the city where cracked sidewalks curved beneath ancient trees. There, tucked between a bookshop and a boarded-up cafe, stood a narrow brick building with golden letters worn thin by time. St. Columba's Home for Orphans. He froze, staring at the sign. Childhood memories rose unbidden. He had known places like this long ago, when life felt uncertain and adults were shadows in doorways. He swallowed hard and pushed the door open. A warm rush of laughter and chatter spilled out, children darting between rows of mismatched chairs, their voices ringing like bells. A kind-faced woman looked up from sorting boxes. "Oh, can I help you?" Keanu simply nodded toward an empty corner. "Would you mind if I showed them something?" They gathered slowly, curiosity bubbling through the room. The mirror stood tall in the corner, blanket draped over it. Keanu waited until the circle of small faces had stilled, until their eyes shimmered with the kind of wonder only children could hold. He knelt beside the mirror, fingers resting on the blanket. "This," he said softly, "is the special mirror. It doesn't just show who you are. It shows what you dream of." The children giggled nervously, not sure if he was serious. Keanu smiled faintly. "You can laugh if you want, but I've seen it happen. Do you want to see?" A dozen heads nodded eagerly. He pulled the blanket away. The first child, A boy with a shy smile and untamed curls stepped forward. His reflection shimmered, then bloomed into a scene of him on a stage, clutching a violin, eyes bright as music filled the air. He gasped, hands flying to his mouth. Another child pushed forward, then another. A girl with pigtails saw herself in a white coat, saving lives in a bustling hospital. A boy with scraped knees saw himself at the wheel of a spaceship, laughing as stars streaked by. Their voices filled the room, a chorus of amazement and laughter and sudden tears. Some spoke of their visions, others hugged themselves tightly, afraid to let the feeling slip away. The caretaker watched with a trembling hand over her heart, tears glistening in her eyes. Keanu felt his throat tighten, overwhelmed by the rawness of it all. And then, without warning, the mirror pulsed brighter than ever before. The glass trembled, and for a moment every reflection merged. Children dancing, building, flying, healing, until Keanu himself appeared among them, older and quiet, standing not as a movie star, not as a man lost in the noise, but as someone holding hands with all those dreamers. The silver crack flared, light spilling from it in thin, radiant streams. And Keanu realized with a jolt that the mirror was giving its final gift. The glass shimmered one last time, then fractured completely, breaking not into sharp shards but into soft, glowing pieces that drifted like fireflies through the air. Children reached out, catching the glowing fragments in their palms, laughing in awe as each piece dissolved into a tiny spark that sank into their skin. Keanu watched, eyes wet, as the last light faded from the room. The mirror's frame remained empty and still, the carved birds and vines now dull. Keanu placed a hand over the bare wood, feeling nothing but quiet. He stayed kneeling there as the children ran to him, tugging at his sleeves, telling him what they saw, what they wanted to be. He smiled through tears, listening, holding their words as carefully as he had held the mirror. He knew then that the magic had not ended. It had simply scattered like seeds carried by the wind, finding homes in every heart it had touched. As he rose to leave, the caretaker caught his arm, eyes shining. "You gave them more than you know," she whispered. Keanu shook his head gently. "It wasn't me," he said, voice soft but sure. "It was all of us, remembering." He stepped out into the night, the air cool and sweet, the city alive with distant lights. In his hands he carried only an empty frame, but in his chest burned a quiet fire. He looked up at the sky, imagining a toy airplane soaring into the stars, and for the first time in decades, he felt like that boy again, limitless, laughing, ready to fly. The city slept under a canopy of stars, the rain finally gone, the night air carrying the faint scent of jacaranda blooms from somewhere distant. Keanu walked slowly, carrying the empty frame against his side. It felt lighter than ever, as if the magic it once held had released its weight. Yet as he moved through the quiet streets, every step seemed to echo with memories. The gas station under flickering light, the trembling hands of the waitress, the boy's paint-splattered reflection, the park alive with forgotten dreams, the mechanic's soft smile as he whispered about racing again, and the children whose laughter still rang in his ears. He reached a hill overlooking the city, where the skyline rose like dark mountains crowned with gold. There he stopped, setting the frame gently against a bench, and sat down, his elbows resting on his knees. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, he allowed himself to close his eyes and simply feel. The night breeze tugged at his hair, cool and soft. Beneath the hum of distant traffic, he could almost hear the voices of those he had met, their dreams blooming like lanterns in the dark. He thought about the crack in the mirror, how it had grown as he gave pieces of himself away. But now, as he sat with only the frame, he realized something profound. The crack had not broken it, it had set it free. The mirror had given back to others, yes, but it had also given back to him. He thought of the boy in the field with the toy airplane, laughing as though nothing in the world could ever hurt him. That boy had not vanished. He had been waiting, patient and quiet, for Keanu to remember him. Keanu opened his eyes and looked at the frame. Without glass, it reflected nothing but the starlit sky behind it. Yet as he watched, something shifted. Not in the wood, not in the empty space, but in himself. He did not need the mirror anymore. He could feel the dream within him without seeing it. He closed his eyes again, and there it was. The rush of air on his face as a plane soared higher, the weightless moment before it dipped, the laughter spilling from his chest. He saw himself on sets, not for fame, but for the joy of creating something that touched people. He saw himself helping strangers quietly, not for gratitude, but because it felt right. He saw a future where he did not run from the boy inside him, but walked beside him. A tear slipped down his cheek, but this time it was not born of sorrow. It was relief. It was release. Dawn crept across the horizon, painting the city in hues of pink and amber. Keanu rose slowly, lifting the frame one last time. He carried it to the edge of the hill where wildflowers grew among stones and set it upright so it faced the rising sun. The carved birds and vines caught the light, glowing faintly as if whispering goodbye. Keanu stepped back, hands in his pockets, and watched as the day broke fully, spilling golden warmth over the world. He felt light, not because the frame was gone, but because he no longer needed anything to remind him of who he truly was. Around him, the city began to stir, unaware of the quiet miracle that had rippled through its streets. Keanu smiled softly to himself, a small private smile, and turned to walk down the hill. As he descended, children's laughter echoed in his mind, the waitress's hopeful smile, the mechanic's whispered promise, the boy's bright eyes. The wind tugged at his jacket, and for a fleeting second, he stretched out his hand like a child pretending to be an airplane, letting it cut through the morning air. He laughed quietly under his breath, genuine, unguarded, feeling more alive than he had in years. And though the mirror no longer existed as it once had, its gift lived on in every person it had touched, including himself. Keanu Reeves disappeared into the waking city, carrying not a frame, not a mirror, but a heart newly stitched together with the threads of countless forgotten dreams, and his own at last remembered.